Hello everyone. Today we are going to get started with chapter 6 audit documentation, and we are going to cover all the RTPs from May 2024 to January 2026. Now in the RTPs there are multiple questions which are given, and we are given questions which are there chapter wise, as well as we are given general as well as case study MCQs. So we are going to cover all the chapter 6 questions which are given. Let us get started, and then after that we are also going to discuss the suggested answers which are given in the RTPs. Let us get started with this question, which is with relation to audit documentation. So now first of all, yeah so now we are given a company, and let us first of all try to read the last line of the question so that we can get a hint of what the case study is about. We have to explain the various points discussed by the audit partner with reference to relevant standard on auditing. So here we are not getting an idea of what exactly it is. That is why we are going to study the entire case study. Let's try to read it. Now, FSY and Company Chartered Accountant completed the statutory audit of Himmat Limited for the year ended 31st March 2025. The audit partner instructed the audit team to finalize and assemble the audit documentation immediately after signing auditor's report on 15th September 2025. So here we are talking about the assembly of audit documentation and signing the audit report. So here we are mainly talking about the topic from audit file. So let's see what exactly is being asked over here. Now yes, however, the audit team took the instruction lightly and forgot to assemble the audit documentation. After 6 months, the audit team started assembling the audit file, completed its documentation. Now here what the problem is that we have to as per the SQC1, we need to have a policy. The firm needs to have policies and procedures about the assembly of audit files after the date of auditor's report. Now it is usually not more than 60 days after the date of auditor's report. However, the same has been mentioned over here as well, and same has been asked over here as well. However, they have not done that. It should have been done by 15 September. It should be immediately after the signing of audit report. However, this has been done after 6 months. So they have started with assembly of the file as well as the completion of documentation, both after 6 months. So now when the audit partner became aware of this, he called a meeting of the staff and discussed the policies and procedures for the timely completion of the audit file, changes to documentation, and period of retention of the engagement documentation. Explain the various points discussed by the audit partner with reference to the relevant standard on auditing. So first of all, we can know that we are talking about SA 230 because audit documentation, audit file has been discussed in this. Now he has asked that we have to discuss or explain the points which are discussed by the audit partner. Now in this previous line only, we are given that the audit partner discussed policies and procedures for timely completion of audit, then changes to the audit documentation, and the period of retention of engagement documentation. So these are the things which have been discussed, and all these three things are separate topics in this chapter. So we have to give and explain all these three topics in detail. Now let us see what exactly the suggested answer is. Now here we can see that we are referring to SA 230 audit documentation, and first of all we are talking in this first paragraph about the timely completion of audit file. This was the first matter which was discussed by the engagement partner. Next we are talking about the changes in audit documentation, and then we are talking about period of retention. So all these three things which have been discussed by the engagement partner has been asked for us to explain. Now let us read in detail what exactly here is given here, and let us mark the keywords as well. So now, as per essay, for when we are talking about timely completion of the audit file, now the auditor will assemble the audit documentation in audit file and complete the administrative process of assembling the audit file on a timely basis after the date of auditor's report. So now this assembly, the assembly of audit file is a administrative process, and this needs to be completed on a timely basis. This is important, and after the date of auditor's report. So it will be done only after the date of auditor's report, and it will be done on a timely basis. Now here we have, and we must refer to SQC1. Now this is very important because SQC1, it requires the firms to establish policies and procedures for timely completion of audit files. Now because the SQC1 is asking the firms to establish policies and procedures for timely completion of the assembly of audit files. Now here appropriate time limit is also been suggested, that appropriate time limit within which the complete assembly of the final audit file should not be more than 60 days from the date of auditor's report. The completion of final audit file will after the date of audit report is only an administrative process, and it does not involve performance of new audit procedures or drawing of new conclusions. So this is also an extremely important thing, that it is only an administrative procedure and there will be no new audit procedures or no new conclusions which will be drawn. Here next point that we are referring therefore is to changes in the audit documentation. So right. Then we are talking about changes in the audit documentation. This was the second thing which was discussed by the engagement partner. So now the changes may be made to the documentation which are only during the final assembly process, which are only administrative in nature. So first of all, we are talking about the audit file, the timely completion, and whatever documents are there. If we want to make any changes in these documents, we need to follow this. That is, any changes which need to be made to the audit documentation only if they are administrative in nature. Now what are the examples of such changes? So this is also very important. This can be a specific question separately as well, but also we will mention it here whenever we are talking about changes in audit documentation. So examples of such changes will include deleting, discarding superseded documentation, sorting, collating, cross-referencing working papers, signing off completion checklists relating to file assembly process, and documenting audit evidence which the auditor has obtained, discussed and agreed with the relevant members of the engagement team before the date of auditor's report. So here first of all we are talking about deleting and discarding any superseded documents. So if there was any document which was there but it is not relevant now because a new and updated document is available, we can do that. That is deleting and discarding superseded documentation. Sorting, collating and cross-referencing papers, like we can sort the papers, cross-reference them. Then sign off completion checklists, like any completion checklist which might have been there, we can sign it off and make such changes which are relating to only final assembly process. Alright, so these checklists relating to the final assembly process, like this is a procedure or control to do that, to make sure that the final assembly process is done right. Then this is very important that we can document only that audit evidence for which has already been obtained, discussed with the relevant team members before the date of auditor's report. So this is quite important. Now the third thing that engagement partner discussed was the period of retention. So as we discussed that we can only now we will discuss like what for what period or for how long do we need to retain the audit documentation. So now it is important to note that the final audit file which has been completed, auditor will not delete or discard any documentation before its retention period. Now what is the retention period? SQC1 requires the firms to establish policies and procedures for the retention of audit engagement. The retention period for engagement is no shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report. So, whatever is the date of auditor's report, from that report, we cannot discard it before 7 years. So, this is the period of retention. Then after that, in case of a group auditor's report, it will be a later date on which it is published. Now we're going to discuss September 2025 RTP question for audit documentation. Here let's try to understand and read the case study what they are trying to ask. Let's first start from the last line, that is discuss the factors on which the form, content and extent of the audit documentation depends. So whenever we are asked about the factors, we have to tell about the factors like size and complexity of the entity, then risk of material misstatements identified. We have to tell about those factors which are going to affect these three things, that is form, content and extent of the audit documentation. Now let us read the full case study in order to get a deeper understanding of this. CA Shilpi, the engagement partner at MN Associates, is assigned the audit of the following two companies: a small family-run business with straightforward operations, minimal internal controls and low transaction volumes; a large multinational corporation with complex operations, multiple subsidiaries, high transaction volumes. During the audit planning stage, During the audit planning stage, CS Shilpi highlights that the form, content, and extent of audit documentation must be customized for each client based on specific factors. Now, from here itself only, by reading up until here only, we can judge that we are talking about the factors which are going to affect the form, content, and extent of audit documentation. So now let us try to understand what exactly is the answer. It is pretty straightforward and an easy question. And here, whenever we are given we are comparing entities, and we are talking about what is going to affect the form, content, and extent of audit documentation, we are going to talk about the factors which are going to affect it. Now let us open up the factors exactly. Right. So first of all, we have the factors, the size and complexity of the entity. So as we are given the two entities in the given question only, that one of them is smaller, less diversified, less audit documentation will be required. Then it is also less complex, so similarly less audit documentation will be required, and vice versa. Then we have the nature of audit procedures to be performed. So now we will judge what are the nature of audit procedures that need to be performed. For example, a diversified company, which is a product company, this will have physical inventory counting to a greater extent, right? But for a service company, there will not be any inventory counting. So documentation will depend on that, what is the nature of audit procedure that needs to be performed. Then we have the identified risk of material misstatement. So if the identified risk of material misstatement is higher, the audit procedures will be also higher, and therefore the audit documentation will also be much more. Then we have the significance of audit evidence obtained. So whatever audit evidence is obtained, depending on that will be the amount of audit documentations which are there. Then we have the nature and extent of exceptions identified. So this is quite important, which tells us about if there are any exceptions. If there are greater exceptions, then more revision of the assessed risk will be there, and more will be the audit documentation. Next is the audit methodology and tools which are used. So audit methodology and tools which are used, that is like if we are making the use of automated things or not, or we are using manual stuff, or what kind of methodology and tools that we are using. Then we have a very important point, that is the need to document a conclusion or basis of conclusion, which is not readily determinable from the documentation of work performed or audit evidence obtained. This particularly means that if the documentation that we already have and the audit evidence that we've already obtained, it is not enough in order to it is not determinable, the conclusion from these two things is not determinable. That is why we need to document it separately. Need to document a conclusion or basis for conclusion, which is not readily determinable from the documentation of work which is performed and audit evidence which is obtained, right? So now if we want to understand and we want to learn it, we can use a very logical sense of things. That is, here we have seen the first of all, audit documentation depends on the size and complexity of the entity. The size and complexity of the entity will also affect the ROM. So that is also one of the factors, right? Identified risk of material misstatements. Then whatever the ROM is, if it is high or low, it will depend, it will impact the nature of audit procedures performed. And it will also, the nature of audit procedures performed, we need to know what is the audit methodology and the tools which are used. Then we also have the nature of the exceptions which are identified, which from as a result of these audit procedures that we have performed. Then what is the significance of audit evidence which has been obtained, which we this audit evidence which we'll get from the audit evidence which is performed. And lastly, we'll tell what is the need for documentation of the conclusion or the basis of conclusion if it is not determinable from the documentation that we have already done and the audit evidence that we have obtained. So if we revise it, it depends on the size and complexity of the entity, identified risk of material misstatements, nature of the audit procedures performed, audit methodology and tools which are used, the nature of exceptions which are identified, and significance of the audit evidence which is obtained, and the need for documenting a conclusion or basis of conclusion. Now we are going to discuss the May 2025 RTP, which came for audit documentation. This is a very important question as well. So we are talking about CAPQ prepared audit documentation for the entity describing the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures performed during the course of the audit. In documenting the nature, timing and extent or course of the audit performed, which matters shall be recorded? This is the first part of the question. Next, he is also of the view that the documentation alone described above meets the requirements of standards on auditing. Comment upon the validity of his views. So, first of all, we have been asked that which matters shall be recorded when we are describing the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures. And the next is that he believes that only recording the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures is enough. However, that is not true. As per the standard of auditing, that is SA 230, which talks about audit documentation, there are two more things which are required over here. Now we will discuss this in detail right here. So first of all, when we are trying to document the nature, this is the first part of the answer and this is the second part of the answer. So whenever we have been asked to document the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures performed, so we will record the following things. That is the identifying characteristics of specific items or matters tested. Like what are the identifying characteristics of the matters that we are testing? Are we testing the completeness? Are we testing the condition? For example, for inventory we are checking the condition and also the rights and obligations. What are we checking exactly? So identifying characteristics of specific items or matters which we are testing. Then after that, we have to give two things. That is who performed the audit work and who and when was the audit work performed, and who and when performed the review. So firstly, who performed the audit work and the date of such work was completed. Then who reviewed the audit work and performed reviewed the audit work performed and the date and extent of such review. So this is what we have to give when we are documenting the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures. So the first thing is the identifying characteristics of the matters that we are testing. Then secondly, who did the work of the audit, who performed the audit work and the date which such work was completed. Then who reviewed the audit work and what was the date and extent of such review. So this is what we are doing. Then after that, the second part of the question which talks about is that is the nature, timing and extent of the of the audit procedures enough documentation? But that is not true. So as per SA 230, we also need to give the other two things, which are these. That is, we also have to take care that the auditor will prepare as per SC 230 such documentation that it is sufficient for sufficient to enable an experienced auditor who is having no connection with the auditor to understand firstly the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures performed, which has already been which is already in his opinion. Then other things that we have to do is the results of audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained. That is conclusions plus audit evidence. So we have to tell about the results of the audit procedures which are performed and also the audit evidence which has been obtained. Next is significant matters arising during the audit and conclusions reached thereon and significant professional judgments made in reaching those conclusions. That is whatever the significant matters that we came across. So significant matters, and इनको करने के लिए we also required significant judgments in order to reaching the conclusions about significant matters. So this is the thing that we need to document apart from nature, timing and extent of audit procedures performed. So now let us revise this. That is, we also need to take care that the audit documentation which is performed, it is sufficient for to enable an audit to enable an experienced auditor who has no previous connection with the audit to understand nature, timing and extent of the audit procedures performed. When we are judging the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures performed, we will give the following matters. That is, identifying the characteristics of specific items or matters which are tested, who performed the audit work and the date such audit work was completed, then who performed the review of the audit work and date and extent of such review. Then what else do we need to give? The results and the audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained, significant matters which arose during the which were there, and the conclusions which were reached, and significant professional judgments made in reaching those conclusions. So now this is all these things we need to this, and then we need to mention that the views of CAPQ were not valid because this was the question that was asked. 25 or question number 14 from audit documentation. So now here we have been given, let's try to understand the last part of the question, that is discuss the issues involved related to audit documentation and assembling of final audit file in this case. So we are mostly talking about audit file and what are the problems in relation to audit documentation, which we'll understand after reading the full question. CA Ribbon completed the audit of listed company and audit report was issued on July 17th. Audit report was issued on July 17, 2024. However, he had not properly organized the audit working papers, including records of discussions with the management, audit procedures performed, and conclusions reached. More than 6 months after issuing, he received a letter from the regulator connecting with the audit of the company, requesting him to share the copy of audit file. In a hurry, CA Ribbon quickly assembled the audit file, adding some papers through he thought were necessary, but he has used the current date on these newly added documents. He then sent the audit file to the regulator. Discuss the issues involved relating to the audit documentation and assembling of the audit file in this case. So here, as we can see, that he has quickly assembled the audit file, and he has quickly assembled the audit file when he was asked, and then after that he has put the current date on these newly added documents. So here the problem is that he has not done a timely assembling of final audit file, and he has also not completed his audit documentation on time. That is why here we are going to give him what is the preparation for, what is the how he has to prepare the audit file, by what date should he have covered the audit file assembly. So now let us try to understand from the answer. Now, whenever we are talking about final audit file assembly, we always have to refer SQC1, which is very, very important. Now, SQC1, here we have to mention that it requires the firms to establish policies and procedures for the timely completion of the assembly of audit files. So now, we have to timely complete the assembly of audit files, and the SQC1 requires us to make policies and procedures in this regard. Let us try to read from the beginning. The auditor shall assemble the audit documentation in the audit file and complete the administrative process of assembly of file on a timely basis after the date of auditor's report. So this is what we have discussed in the previous questions as well, that the words timely and before the date of after the date of auditor's report it needs to be completed. So now we are going to most importantly, that it is an administrative process. So now no new opinions or new audit procedures are going to be there. Auditor shall assemble the audit documentation and audit file and complete the administrative process of the file on a timely basis after the date of auditor's report. SQC1 requires the firms to establish policies and procedures for the timely completion of audit report, for the timely completion of assembly of audit files. Now, most importantly, here we are also given that an appropriate time to complete the assembly of audit file is not more than 60 days after the date of auditor's report has been issued. This has been provided in the SQC. This has been provided in the question as well. Now, the completion of assembly of audit file after the date of auditor's report is an administrative process, and it does not involve the performance of any new audit procedures or drawing on of any new conclusions. Changes, however, may be made to the audit documentation which are administrative in nature only. Then after that, we are also given what exactly is the importance of timely completion or timely preparation of audit documentation. Why are we giving this here? Because we have been asked two things, that is the problem with the audit documentation and audit evidence. So if we refer to the question over here again, we have to discuss the issues related to audit documentation and assembly of final audit file. So for this part, we have completely understood, and we have given that how he will be doing it, how SQC1 requires it 60 days के पहले करना है, and no new procedures will be performed, but changes can be made to the audit documentation. Here we are also given the importance for timely preparation. So preparing sufficient and appropriate audit documentation on a timely basis will help to enhance the quality of audit. The first thing is that it will help to enhance the quality of audit, and it will facilitate the effective review and evaluation of audit evidence which has been obtained and the conclusions which have been reached during the auditor's report. So what exactly is it going to help in? It will enhance the quality of audit, Then this is the first thing. Secondly, that it will help in the effective review effective review of two things, that is the audit evidence and conclusions before the auditor's report. Now, documentation is prepared after the audit work has been performed, and so any documentation which has been prepared after the audit work has been performed will be less accurate than the documentation prepared at the time the audit work is performed, because the given CA has done the audit documentation work after the 6 months, that is after the work has already been performed, so therefore it is likely to be less accurate. In the given case, even after passage of more than 6 months, CA report has not assembled the audit file. Besides, he has put some papers with current date on which is not permissible at all. It shows that that part of audit documentation has been prepared afterwards, putting a question mark on the quality of audit. So this is completely given in this question, and it is a very very important question where we are talking about both audit documentation and the assembly of audit files. Going to be discussing September 2024 RTP on audit documentation. Now here it has been given, and it is a very important question as well. An important factor in determining the form, content and extent of audit documentation of significant matters is the extent of professional judgment exercised in performing the audit work and evaluating the results. Explain clearly with the example of significant matters. So here in the last question, it has been identified what exactly the question wants, that is the example of significant matters. Now what we have to do is that in the audit documentation, we also have to give certain significant matters. We understood in the previous question one of the previous questions as well, that we have to give nature, timing and extent of audit procedures, then what are the conclusions reached, and also we have to give the significant matters and the conclusions reached, and also significant judgments involved in that. So for the third point, they're asking the examples of such significant matters. Here we can also get confused that are they asking for factors of which determine form, content and extent, but it's not true. This particular line from here up until here has been given along with the examples of significant matters. So it is given in the this is a line which is very specifically given in the module itself. Now let us try to understand what are the significant matters that we are talking about. Now, these are the examples of the significant matters that we're talking about. First of all, the matters which give rise to significant risks. So now anything which has a very significant risk, for example in inventory, the valuation can be risky, so that is a significant matter and we need to document that. And the form, content, and as it is given in the question, the form, content and extent of audit documentation about significant matters will depend on his professional judgment. Now what are these significant matters? Matters which give rise to significant risks. Secondly, we are given that results of audit procedures which indicate that the financial statements could be materially misstated, or there is a need to revise the auditor's previous assessment of risk of material misstatement and auditor's responses to those risks. So now we have to give those audit procedures which either which indicate that the financial statements could be misstated, or which led to the revising of the identified risk of material misstatements and therefore the response of auditor to those risks. If there are such audit procedures which were performed, those also which identified these two things, they also need to be documented. Now circumstances that cause auditor significant difficulty in applying audit procedures. So now if there are any circumstances like for example any limitation put by management, or if the personnel was not supportive, so the circumstances which made it difficult for the auditor or caused the auditor significant difficulty in applying audit procedures, then that is also an example of significant matter. What else? Findings which could result in the modification of the audit opinion and or the inclusion of emphasis of matter paragraph in the auditor's report. So now any findings or any things which might have led to which have triggered SA 705, that is which have led to modification in the opinion, or which have triggered SA 706, that is emphasis of matter paragraph, will also be documented. So if we quickly revise this, matters which give rise to significant risks, then audit procedures, the results of audit procedures, that the financial statements could be materially misstated, or that there is a need to revise the auditor's previous assessment of risks of material misstatements and auditor's responses to those risks. Then next, circumstances which cause the auditor significant difficulty in carrying out the audit procedures, and lastly the findings which could result in SA 705, that is modification of the opinion, modification of the audit opinion, or inclusion of an emphasis of matter paragraph in the auditor's report. Now we're going to cover May 2024 audit documentation RTP. It talks about, first question is, there are two questions which are given, and the first question is that CA Rajni, a CA student, has understood SA 230 requires auditor to prepare audit documentation on a timely basis. So here, audit documentation on a timely basis, and while reading about SQC1, she notices the time limit for completion of final audit file is not more than 60 days after the date of auditor's report, right? And she finds it puzzling. Unable to comprehend, she seeks your guidance. Guide her. So whenever we are asked about guidance or anything, we should require, or we are required to give out the complete information. Incomplete information is given in the question, or what the auditor has, to whom we have to give guidance, and we have to complete that information. Apart from that, here we have obtained a cue by doing previous questions as well. Whenever we are asked about audit documentation preparation on a timely basis, we mostly have to give the importance of doing so. So we also have to write out the points for the importance of completion of audit documentation on a timely basis. Then here also we have mentioned that SQC1 requires time limit for the completion of audit, not more than 60 days. So here we will explain the entire SQC1 and whatever that we have to cover over here. So now let us come on to the answer of the solution. So right, SA 230 requires that the auditor shall prepare audit documentation on a timely basis, and preparing sufficient and appropriate audit documentation on a timely basis will help to enhance the quality of the audit. So first of all, we will enhance the quality of the audit, and then it will facilitate the effective and effective review and evaluation of the audit evidence obtained and the conclusions which are reached before the audit report is finalized. So what are the three things? Again, quality will be enhanced, and then effective review and evaluation of the conclusions and audit evidence before the audit report is finalized. Then we are talking about the SQC1 and also about the time about the next part of the question. SQC1 requires the auditor to complete assembly of final audit file not more than 60 days, and the completion of final audit file after the date of audit report is only an administrative process, and it does not involve the performance of any new audit procedures or any new conclusions. Auditor will prepare documentation on a timely basis. Completion of the final audit file, which is an administrative process, time period is 60 days, which has been this. So here, like, little points about the SQC1 and whatever was given has been provided. Next is, in the same, we are also given this question: discuss the meaning of completion memorandum. So now a completion memorandum, whatever significant matters are there in the audit documentation, we have to prepare a summary of these significant matters, and it has certain benefits, like it will be helpful in review when we are reviewing large and complex audits, and it will improve the quality of audit, etc. So let us try to understand this question as well. So so completion memorandum is a summary of what? Describing significant matters which were identified during the audit and how they were addressed. So this is one of the things that we document things about, that is significant matters and how they were addressed, how the conclusions were reached. So a summary of that will also be provided, and which is known as a completion memorandum. Such summary will facilitate, now we are given the importance of completion memorandum. It will facilitate the effective and efficient review and inspection of audit documentation for large and complex audit. Effective and efficient view and also inspection of audit documentation when we are having a large and complex audit. Then preparation of summary. Yes, so this is very important, that a preparation of summary will assist the auditor's consideration of significant matters. So if he has to prepare a summary, then he will also revisit or consider the significant matters that he discussed. It may also help the auditor to consider whether there is any individual relevant essay objective which he has not fulfilled or he could not achieve, and which will prevent him from fulfilling overall objectives. So whenever he is preparing a summary, he will also come across any particular any of the objectives of an essay which he was not able to fulfill, which again will further prevent him to fulfill the overall objective of audit.